This episode is brought to you by Prime. What if you had one more chance with the one that got away?
Sam.
You came home.
Based on the best-selling novel from Carly Fortune. Every Year After follows childhood friends Sam and Percy as they reunite in the dreamy, nostalgic lakeside town of Barry's Bay.
Love can be hard to find. So if you're lucky enough to find that person, never let go.
A second chance at first love. Every Year After, now streaming only on Prime.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
What did you steal?
Secrets.
Disclosure Day is Steven Spielberg's best film in 20 years.
Are they people?
No.
Are they human?
Oh my God.
Spielberg does this better than anybody in history.
I can see them. They're coming.
Disclosure Day. Rated PG-13. Some material may be inappropriate for children under 13. In theaters Friday. Get tickets now.
Hey, this is Joey Casada, and you're listening to Jay Scott on The Hook Rocks. Trust me, he's a beautiful man.
What's happening? It's Jay Scott. Welcome back to the Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate you listening. Thanks for all the positive feedback from the latest episodes we've done. We've had some great stuff happening. So thank you very much for that. As I always mention, we're part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, the great network of music-related podcasts. You can catch my friends, as I always mention, on that platform, such as Mistress Carrie, the legendary DJ out in Boston, Martin Popoff, the rock historian, Chris and Aaron on Decibel Geek, Tom and Zeus on the Shout Out Loudcast. We just had Zeus on doing the White Snake Legacy show, so check that out, as well as Mac from the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast. Great podcast, too, as well. Don't forget to follow them on all social media platforms at Pantheon Pods on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as their website, pantheonpodcast.com. Don't forget to follow the Hook Rocks wherever you podcast and set your app to automatic download so you get the latest episodes right to your phone whenever they drop. And also, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We always appreciate new followers and new feedback and always talking music on any platform that you choose. Like I said, we've had some great episodes. I just mentioned the White Snake Legacy show with Zeus from Shout Out Loudcast. Great to talk about a band that really does have an extensive history that is widely unknown for listeners in the U.S., and we get into it and talk about it in this episode, so check that out. We had the music insider, the great Christine Eagle, one of my favorite guests on the show. We talked about the Facebook algorithm and the ever-changing algorithm that bands have to keep up with, the future of NAMM and what that will bring, and also the court ruling on the streaming service revenue payouts, which I'm sure you'll find interesting, plus a lot more on that. Christy always brings it every time she comes on. She's very well researched. She knows her stuff. And if you're a new band and you're listening, she's a great resource to map out what you need to do in terms of the business side of running a band and all that goes into it. She's phenomenal. So if she can't get you the answers, she'll find someone that can. So please reach out to her, use her as a resource. As of course, we always promote new bands. We've had some fantastic new music spotlights too as well, with Broken Love, with The Warning, with Frame 42, and Clay Dieters from The Issue. So check out all those 4. And our latest episode, Joey Casada returns to talk about one of my favorite music books called Start With a Dream. And it's about his life growing up in New York, getting connected with music and the relationship he had with music along with his friends, and basically what it was to grow up during that time. And if you're a music fan that grew up in the late 70s, the 80s into the early 90s, you will appreciate this story, this book, because it really does hit home and brings you back to when time was a little simpler, a little slower, and how you gathered information and how you bonded with your buddies on bikes, riding to the record store, riding to go get a fast food burger, wherever it was. So check out the latest episode with Joey Casada. He's always a great guest, great guy, one of the true gents in rock and roll. And without further ado, we'd like to welcome in Rob, and it's at the Recidivist on Twitter. Rob, as you know, is our quarterly guest as we do our live album reviews. We've done some great albums. These episodes get great feedback, and the listeners love them. We started off with back in this time last year, I believe. It was around July or June of 2021. Our first album we did was Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. And then we did a special fall episode right before Halloween with the great 80s live album, Iron Maiden, Live After Death. We then followed that up with probably the reason why there were so many live albums in the 70s, and that's Humble Pie, Rockin' the Fillmore. Our last one we did was Kiss Alive. And the next album that we're going to talk about today is regarded as one of the best, if not the best, live albums in the 70s. We did Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. We did Kiss Alive. Depending on who you talk to, those two are spoken about a lot when you rank them in the 70s about which band had the live album. But one thing is common with all 3 albums that we've talked to that have been released in the 70s is the fact that the energy of the band explodes on these records. And for the most part, it was never able to be captured in a studio album. But you have these live albums that really give you the energy of the band and really what they were all about. Thin Lizzy, Kiss, and now UFO. We're talking Strangers in the Night, the great live album of the 70s with the Recidivists. What's going on, Rob?
Hey, Jay. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for doing this again. I always enjoy these conversations. It's fun picking out these albums whenever we decide to do them once a quarter. And I like what we did this past time, or for this album, we ran a poll with 4 albums. We did Strangers in the Night. We did, I think, Live at Leeds by The Who. We did Unleashed in the East by Priest, and Live at Hammersmith by Motorhead. And Strangers in the Night was the clear winner. So we'll continue to do that and find out what people want to talk about or want to hear us talk about. But yeah, this is a great album, and this is one that is probably on the upper echelon of all-time great live albums.
Yeah, those are 4 great albums that you chose to put in that poll. I'm glad that this one got picked because before we started doing this, we had done that episode where we talked about our top 5 live albums, and we both had Strangers in the Night in our top 5 live albums. And so I got really excited to talk about this one. You're not kidding about this one being revered. I have a very specific memory from the 80s. I was subscribing to Guitar for the Practicing Musician. They had an issue of the magazine that had interviewed like probably 20 different guitarists, rock and roll guitarists, and asked them what were the most important albums to them, what played the most significant role in forming them as players. And a number of them pointed to Strangers in the Night and Michael Schenker's playing. I specifically remember Kirk Hammett from Metallica had this on his list. I'm pretty sure that Chris DeGarmo and Michael Wilton of Queensryche both pointed to it as well. So, yeah, the impact of this album is significant.
It really is, and that's great that you mentioned that, because UFO is a very underappreciated band. It's a very underrated band that had some success here in the U.S. And obviously this live album is regarded as their, people, if you ask a UFO fan what album to start with, 9 out of 10 are going to say this album. And of course, there's some great studio albums too as well that they have, but this really is the pinnacle of their career and their discography. Some of the show was recorded in Chicago, so it kind of has a personal connection to me. And UFO, for that matter, was huge in Chicago. Back then, back in the late 70s, bands had different circuits, and it was very regionalized with radio and, with concert halls. And a band that may not do well on the East Coast may do well on the West Coast or in the Midwest, vice versa, how it worked. And because of that, you had radio stations really pushing these bands when they would come through, and the ones that really resonated with their audience would get pushed a lot. So Chicago was one of those audiences that really pushed UFO and really had a connection with UFO, and was one of the reasons why they were so popular, especially in the Midwest. Now, I can't speak for the West Coast or the East Coast because I didn't grow up there, or I didn't understand that or experience that, I should say. But I know because of neighbors who were older than me growing up, they had UFO shirts. They were always listening to UFO. So, UFO had a big connection here in Chicago.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I actually was wondering about that, how much UFO had exposure in your market. Because I grew up in the Denver area. I had family in Tennessee, and so I spent a lot of time there as well. And I don't really remember UFO getting much exposure for listening to. Now, it's possible it was there and I just missed it. And it wasn't until I started seeing guitar players citing to this album that I really thought maybe I should investigate UFO, because I don't remember ever hearing a UFO song on the Denver radio stations. Even though there were some good hard rock and album-oriented stations, I don't remember this material ever showing up. And so when I found out about it, which was in the early to mid 80s, and started investigating the catalog, I thought, man, I was really missing out. And I'm really sad that they didn't have more of this out there. I know they were probably bigger in other areas, but I feel like they should have been a nationwide phenomenon, a worldwide phenomenon. I know they probably got more exposure in England than they did in the United States. But
I remember listening to them in here in Chicago and having them always in rotation on the radio stations that I would listen to. So they always had an impact. And of course, Michael Schenker was regarded as one of the great guitar players of all time, a guitar god. You could talk to Kirk Hammett, especially, heavily influenced him. He was known as a great guitar player prior to this, but I think this definitely elevated him into another level with fans, with guitar players, because like I said in the beginning, the studio albums that they had were great. However, this album, like Kiss Alive, like Live and Dangerous, and like so many other albums in the 70s, elevated that energy, really exposed that energy to fans. And it was just absolutely phenomenal, with the energy. I mean, you and I were talking before we started doing this episode and how we both revisited this album prior to recording it. And again, like live albums kind of have that, for me at least, that unfortunate category of you listen to it, you love it, and then you don't listen to it for a while for whatever reason. But whenever you do go months or years without listening to a particular live album and then you put it in, it's always like, wow, this is so great. This is so awesome. Why don't I listen to this more? I don't know the reason why, but it's definitely something that I need to change. Maybe it'll be an upcoming New Year's resolution for 2023.
That's a great one. You can, if I can suggest it, spend every Sunday morning listening to a live album in its entirety.
That's actually, live Sundays or Sundays live at the Rocks or something like that.
It's what I look forward to every week. But you're right. I think that, I think that these days, especially, one of the reasons that maybe you don't revisit some of your favorite stuff more often is just because of the sheer volume of great music that's been going out. And I struggle to stay on top of things that I want to listen to And sometimes those old favorites get left set gathering dust for a little while. But going back to what you were saying about the energy of the album, I was doing a little reading about the album in preparation for this, and I saw that this is obviously just before Michael Schenker left the band. And I saw some sort of an anecdotal reference that he refused to do any overdubs afterwards for the record. And as a result, you probably get a more live experience from his playing than you might have otherwise if they polished it up more. And I really like that. There's at least one point where I hear him slightly misfret something, and I love that because I'm like, oh, he's human. And this person that's playing this fabulous thing can occasionally make a mistake too, but that's part of the experience. And it just gets me into the whole live concept.
That's something that's been lost recently too in music, especially rock music, is the enjoyment of the experience and the understanding that it's not going to be perfect like the album.
Yeah.
A lot of young fans who are coming up expect to hear it verbatim or sound the same. And that really isn't what the live experience is about. It's never been about. It's about those mistakes. It's about the energy. It's about the synergy with the crowd. There's nothing better when you go see a live show when the crowd has met the band with an energy level that makes the band even perform even better, creating that synergy and hearing the mistakes, maybe playing a little too fast in certain parts or maybe forgetting, a part here. That's great. That's the beauty of it. Right. And I just think that today with the backing tracks and the lip syncing, I don't know why people want that. I mean, if you want lip syncing and backing tracks, stay home and listen to the album. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to hear that pure, organic, authentic live sound. And I appreciate when new bands are doing that and carrying on that torch. It's very important.
Me too. I've seen there's one really good new live album that came out in the last couple of weeks. That it made me so happy to see a current band putting out a live album. It was clearly recorded in a very small club setting, but even that you can sense the energy and the interaction, and that's something. And the improvisation that comes with a live experience. That's the genius of humanity in music, as opposed to spitting it out digitally and having everything be absolutely perfect. It's much better for me this way.
So released in January 1979, the album, like I said, was recorded in Chicago, or part of it in Chicago, at the International Amphitheater, as well as the Louisville Gardens in Louisville, Kentucky. Again, continuing the theme in the 70s of great live albums. This was released in the last year of the 70s, and again, captures the moment, captures the energy, the essence of UFO. I can't say enough about it. Like you said, it's really is a pure live album. The album starts out with Natural Thing, which is one of my favorite tunes. I absolutely love it. And that was the first track on the original LP.
Yeah, we were talking about before we started that this album actually has at least 4 different major iterations. You have the original release that you're talking about, which is the first cassette that I had of this album was the original release. And then in 98, I believe, they did a reissue, which they added one track and reordered the songs. I read something that said they were trying to more accurately reflect the average set list that they had at the time. And they had like a 2008 remaster of the album. And then in 2020, there was a 8-disc version that was released it had the original 2 LPs plus 6 different whole concerts from that same time frame. And I'm telling myself I need to get that. My wallet tells me I don't need to get that, but I'm telling myself I need to get that.
Yeah. So the problem with a vinyl and music collector is the wallet has to remind us sometimes that it's not the right time to buy this. You got to wait.
Yeah. But the Natural Thing is, I've always thought the lyrics were a little odd. When I was younger, I'd listen to them and go, man, what are they talking about? Because it sure sounds like innuendo. Then they've got the whole Phil Mogg going, I didn't even like it. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? But the thing about this song and a number of songs throughout the course of the recording is I really learned to appreciate how much effort Paul Raymond is going through, because he's switching back between keyboards and guitars. You have Michael Schenker, who's in the right channel doing all the guitar stuff, but Raymond is in mid-song switching back and forth between the two different instruments. Man, you are number one, a great human being for letting the lead flashy guy take all the ego gratifying things, and you're doing all the support work, and you don't hear complaints or anything about it, but he is making the song, like bringing it all together. I think that's really cool.
What's interesting about this album as well is, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, that maybe you're just a casual UFO fan. I'm sure the hardcore fans do. But during this tour, Michael Schenker ended up leaving the band. He was replaced by Paul Chapman, the ex-Lone Star guitarist. It had been rumored that Schenker refused to record any overdubs for the album, like you mentioned, which would make this an accurate account of his live guitar work. When he discussed this album, Schenker spoken about the disappointment with the chosen tracks, saying there was better takes they could have used.
I'm glad they stick with the ones that they used, because it just it's much more organic to me that way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Schenker is very outspoken, has his opinions on a lot of things. This, is certainly one of them. But, it's ironic that probably the biggest album that they've ever had is about a tour with one of the great guitar players, is from a tour with one of the great guitar players, then ended up leaving the band midway through the tour.
Yeah. I also think it's really cool the way the natural thing without break segues straight into Out in the Street, which is off of a completely different studio album, because Natural Thing was off No Heavy Petting and Out in the Street was off Force It, but they play it so seamlessly that you almost think that it's a natural double song combination. And I think that they worked that out really well.
This album ended up charting number 42 in the U.S. and number 7 in the U.K. Critics and fans have always suggested or marked this as one of the greatest live rock albums of all time. So kind of what we discussed before diving into this album. Kerrang! Magazine listed this album as number 47 among the 100 greatest heavy metal albums of all time. And Slash, like many guitar players, stated that this is his favorite live album. Founding UFO member Pete Way and Andy Parker both say it is their favorite album as well. Moving on to the track list, they go into, like you said, Out in the Street, and then Only You Can Rock Me, which is one of their more popular songs, certainly. And again, that was one that's got frequent plays on radio. It's got a great hook. It's a great rock and roll tune.
Yeah, they actually had there was an EP that had Only You Can Rock Me with Cherry and Rock Bottom on it. And, you could actually go, they've done a pretty good job if you buy the re-releases of the CDs of the 5 albums that have Schenker in the band, most of them have a couple of bonus tracks that are live recordings as well. And so you can almost go through those 5 albums and put together a whole nother live album. Some of them are the same songs here, but you can hear some of the variations and get a sense of the dynamics of the band.
Absolutely. I've got a box set myself with a bunch of all their recordings, or I think all their albums released, I think up until like 83 or 84. So I think there's probably about 7 or 8 albums in the box set that I have.
One of the things I really enjoy about UFO songs is they had a real knack for either doing an intro in one key and then the main verse would shift into a different key for a different, like, real mood feel, or they would change key for the solo, but they always had like some shift in the song that would keep the listener interested. And if there's one part of the song where you're like, oh, okay, this feels kind of light, and then all of a sudden it comes in and just hits you with a really heavy lead guitar, and pulls you back into the song. And there's a really good example in this that we'll get to. That I think of how it impacts me, but I think that they were really accomplished at maintaining listener interest through key shifts.
That's interesting you say that, because that is something that not a lot of people would pick up on unless you know music or you've played music. But you're right. I mean, it's each song with UFO really takes on a life of itself. They have a very unique style, different style than a lot of bands that were their contemporaries in the 70s and into the 80s. I mean, the only closest one that you could probably say is the Scorpions. And of course, there's that Schenker connection there too as well. But UFO really, with this style of music, was kind of the trendsetter, was kind of the leading the frontier of this style of rock music.
Right. And then I'm actually, because I'm looking at that, because I listened to the 98 reissue. I'm actually not entirely certain if my song order is a little different at this point from yours. So I don't know. The next song after Only You Can Rock Me, on the one I listened to, is Mother Mary. Was it like that on the original? Because I don't recall.
No, the original has Dr. Doctor. Mother Mary is the first song on side 2. But Dr. Doctor, again, another song that just really comes to life when they play it live. For Iron Maiden fans, they know this song as the band's intro, probably for the last 10 plus years for Iron Maiden, probably longer than that. It gets the crowd going. And of course, Iron Maiden has spoken about the influence that UFO has had on the band. And there are parts in this album that I'm going to get to eventually here in the next few songs, that hearing these songs live and the renditions they do, man, you really hear why and how Iron Maiden was influenced by them, almost to the point where you're like, oh, wow, this sounds like Iron Maiden. And you've got to say, no, Iron Maiden sounds like UFO. It's very, I'll talk, when we get to the song, I will break it down, but Iron Maiden wears their UFO influence on their sleeves. And there's a few other bands. I mean, we talked about the influence that Lizzie had on Iron Maiden, but more so with UFO. You listen to Maiden's music after listening to this album, especially, and man, I mean, that is a bridge that is alive and well and exists to this day.
Yeah, the liner notes for the 2008 remaster included a few paragraphs from Steve Harris talking about how important the album was, and he says UFO should have been bigger, much, much bigger. There are 1,000,001 reasons why that didn't happen, but music isn't one of them. And he goes on to speak about how important their music was to him. So you're absolutely right about the Iron Maiden influence from this.
Dr. Doctor is a great track, a great song. It gets better with age. It doesn't age at all, but it gets better as I've gotten older and I've learned to appreciate the song. And then hearing, when you go to an Iron Maiden show and hearing fans appreciate and get into it and put their fists in the air and sing along to a song that's not an Iron Maiden song, but they're gearing up for the show.
Yeah.
Is just a remarkable moment for anyone who's had to experience that.
Yeah, the song, the live version of the song has like that kind of cool, dreamy intro to it, and then it suddenly punches you in the gut with the full force of the song. It's really cool.
It's not just the tone and the style of music, or the way they play the music, I should say, but it's also like with the arrangements. I mean, when you hear an Iron Maiden song similar to UFO, each song takes on a life of their own, and that is probably the biggest influence UFO has had on Maiden, is in the arrangement. Now, you can also talk about, with the guitar work and how the songs are played and the tone of the songs, and some of that galloping comes from a lot of UFO tunes. There is not another band that shows their influence the most for UFO than Iron Maiden, certainly.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So moving on to side 2, we go into Mother Mary, which is the song that you were going to mention here. That's kind of different on the reissues, but on the original track listing, this was the first song on side 2. And for folks that are listening that don't understand, the side 1, side 2, there's 4 sides to this album. This is when albums came out on vinyl, where because if you put too many songs on one side, it would affect the quality and the sound of the vinyl. So that's why they broke it up with only a certain amount of minutes for one side to have. And that's why you had, double albums or, like this, because it wasn't because of, it's just because it was a double album we got to release it. It was driven more because of, like I said, the quality of the sound for the vinyl.
Yeah, and you're right, and the this, I don't want to venture into Skylab turf here. I'm sure he could tell us all about the how much you can fit onto a record and why certain records are at certain speeds and how you can have 12 inches records that are at 45 RPMs. That's his expertise. I don't know about that, but you're right. You don't want to cram in too much on one side. Mother Mary was off of the album Force It, which my understanding is that Force It was, they had a tendency to have the Hypnosis covers for the Michael Schenker era albums. And Force It had has that picture of a couple in a bathtub, and you can't tell a whole lot about them, but it has faucets everywhere. And I'm somewhere someone said that the cover was based off of the British pronunciation of faucet. And so that's where it kind of played as like a play on words of sorts. But this is Mother Mary's from a song title, you would think, oh, this is going to be a very nice, light, gentle song, but it has a really aggressive tone to it. And they do something that I typically would associate with either Deep Purple, especially Deep Purple Mark II, or Rainbow, very similar things where you have an organ and the guitar playing a line together, is somewhat a complex line. Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord were pretty known for doing that. And he did it some with Rainbow later on. But Schenker and Raymond here both have several songs where the two instruments play together. It's like they go apart and they come together for this line, and then the song goes on. And that has a lot of interest for me.
One of the things about UFO, like you mentioned, was their album covers, especially during the Schenker era too, as well. And again, a lot of that influence from Schenker rubbed off on the Scorpions, because you kind of look at the Scorpions covers that were, you kind of interpreted them differently than the person sitting next to you, or you kind of stopped and stared at what they were trying to say. They were like pieces of art, basically, right? Because each person would have a different interpretation to that. And that was an always interesting thing too about UFO, was, like I've stated before about albums and vinyl. You'd study the album cover and you try to figure out what it was. You'd study the liner notes, and they were really big into that, which I appreciate more and more as I get older, and how the artwork has evolved with the music too as well.
Yeah, and Hypnosis was there was like a style that they would approach. They put a lot of photographs into the album covers, but they also would kind of overlay other graphics with those photographs. And sometimes they were doing things that were kind of like tongue in cheek, or you'd have a pun that was visual in nature, and so that was definitely present for a lot of their albums.
Yeah, and as you go through the discography, I guess it's always hard to choose, what you put in a set list a band has. But man, there's some songs as I listen to this, like, man, and there's some stuff on the reissue too as well that has some different set lists on there. But I wish they would have done a couple other things too as well on this album.
Yeah, do you have a particular favorites you'd like to have seen included?
Sherry, I would love to have on this album, which I thought was a great song.
It is on the reissue.
Yeah.
And so I too am glad that they had that song included on there.
Yeah, that's a great one. Just Another Suicide is another good one too as well.
Yeah.
That's a great song. I mean, just the riffs are incredible. There's so many that I would love to see on there, but hey, like I said, it's hard to choose a set list when you're putting together, a tour here, and they definitely deliver with a lot of great songs too as well, which is the next one is This Kids, which I don't really appreciate, or I don't really get into it on the studio album, but the live version of this song is just tremendous.
Yeah. Another song off of Force It. What I really like about this particular song is that you have a lot of songs where when people are trying to create more listener interest, like the lead will either change key, as I talked about before, or sometimes we'll go into a double time feel. This one does the reverse, where the Schenker's lead is actually in a halftime kind of feel, and it kind of takes it to a more even pace and kind of a more somber setting, and then it comes back up once the solo is over.
Interesting. Yeah. No, this is when I talk in the beginning about the definition of the energy, or define the energy that's on this album. This is a great example, because for me, the studio album version does not come close to anywhere near the live version.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Absolutely.
The next song is Love to Love. And this is what I was talking about when I referenced the direct Iron Maiden influence, how the song starts out very slow and builds and builds and builds to this epic ending, this kick-ass rock song at the end. It starts out as a ballad and then just goes into overdrive. And that's similar to a lot of songs, from Iron Maiden, not necessarily ballads, but in terms of the arrangements that they had as a band throughout their career as well.
This is my absolute favorite UFO song. And this version is my favorite. The only knock I have on this version of the song is that it's not longer. That solo I wish would go on forever. This is the song and you're being very responsible and you're checking your surroundings, and then that lead hits and suddenly you're in a race with everybody else. They don't know they're racing you, but you're all going for it. And this song just makes you want to go twice the speed from when you started out listening to it. I love this song.
It definitely does, hit that spot, for a lot of rock fans. The song is like three different songs in one.
Yeah, it definitely, it has that, it feels like a real composition. And right. I think Schenker is right at the top of his game on this song. It's like you think about a live moment where a guitarist is feeling it, and it's like the instrument has come alive in his or her hands, and you can almost picture the smoke rising from the fretboard. That is this song.
It's an amazing tune, amazing soul, like you said. Moving on to side 3, it goes into Lights Out, which was probably my first introduction into UFO when I was growing up, because that was the song that was heavily played in Chicago radio. And this version was the one that was played a lot in Chicago. I think the other 3 were probably Only You Can Rock Me, Too Hot to Handle, Love to Love would be on too, as well as Dr. Doctor. But for the most part, Lights Out was the big song, at least in this market here in Chicago. And man, listening to this again as we were preparing for this, it really brought me back to being a young kid again, and hearing this on the one speaker on my Panasonic, cassette stereo, and then upgrading to a Sanyo back in the day, with my paper route money. And then of course the big one that I had with the Sony with the 5 disc changer. But hearing this song reminds me of just staring at the ceiling with my foot, tapping and just listening to this song, because it meant a lot to my growth into my music journey.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to me why it would be big in the Chicago area, because this is one of those great moments where you have crowd interaction of sorts, where they change the lyric, where in the studio version they're saying Lights Out of London, and this one they changed it to Chicago, and you hear the crowd react to that change. So that makes sense to me why it would be big there. I wrote down a few notes about each song on this one. I wrote down, this one feels like Charging into Battle.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, is this about the invasion in England during World War II?
I don't know. That's a really good question. It very well could be. I mean, these guys are all of a post-war age. They're all from 48 to 55, I think, was when they were born. So, but they certainly could have the influence from their parents that could lead to that. That's a really good question. I'd like to know the answer to that.
That's something we got to research here as we after we finish, because I'd like to know the answer to that, because it sounds like it would be like you mentioned, going to war, lights out in London. Did they turn the lights off as, the invasion happened, and when when planes would bomb with England and the UK, what was that like?
Yeah, that hadn't occurred to me. I want to know the answer too.
We move on to Rock Bottom, and this features just an epic version on this album of another one of their more popular songs. Probably not the level as the ones I mentioned, but certainly does have a huge contingency of UFO fans that love this song. And it just features Schenker just blazing on guitar, just absolutely just killing it.
Yeah, this was off the first album that Schenker appeared on, Phenomenon. And I think this is one of the great riffs in rock and roll, that intro riff. And actually, they do a pretty good job of getting the anticipation going with Andy Parker hitting the hi-hat in the rhythm of the song. But when that riff comes in, it's the riff that sticks in my head the most. It's like an earworm for me that for days, because I heard it this morning, this is going to be in my head, especially if I don't have other music on.
Fantastic song. I mean, just the playing by Schenker on this.
Yeah.
For guitar players, this is a song you got to check out.
This has a great extended solo on it. If you don't play guitar, I think that it might make you want to start playing guitar. If you do play guitar, it makes you want to spend the next 6 hours trying to get some sort of energy out of the instrument that Schenker gets here.
Fantastic. I mean, again, this ends side 3. There's only 2 songs on side 3 because of the length of Rock Bottom. And it goes into side 4 on the original pressing with Too Hot to Handle, which was another big song for them, as big as it probably could have been for them. And again, this is one that people know. Casual UFO fans certainly know this song, but this, starts the charge, leads the way for side 4 to end the album.
Yeah, and this is off Lights Out. This was a Pete Way and Phil Moggs song. It wasn't a Schenker composition. I was trying to decide if the song sounds a little different because it didn't have Schenker's influence in the writing of the song. It might. It has like a little more of an upbeat, slightly less aggressive, if I dare say that, than some of the other stuff. So it's possible that if you want to go through and kind of piece out where each band member influenced the writing, you might be able to do that here.
Yeah. One of the things about this band is it has 3 really big personalities, with Michael Schenker, Pete Way, and Phil Mogg. And when you read Pete Way's book, man, his life, he's passed away now. He's no longer living, but similar to Motley Crue, when you look at Motley Crue on stage, you say, how are these 4 individuals still alive? It's the same thing with Pete Way. Like, how did that man last as long as he did with the amount of drugs and alcohol he put into his body?
Yeah. I feel bad that, the original lineup for Fastway was supposed to be Pete Way and Fast Eddie Clark. And then it was because of contractual issues that Pete Way wasn't able to stay with them and record that debut album. And I feel sad about that because I really think there could have been something magical there with having those 2 personalities involved.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I was going to mention it, and I'm glad you did, because as he parted ways with UFO, as did Fast Eddie from Motorhead, they joined forces, originally joined forces to form this band Fastway, which is regarded as part of the new wave of British heavy metal movement. And they were never, I think, because of something Pete Way did, he was not able to get a visa or something similar to that. He was not able to travel, or I'm trying to remember, did he do the album and wasn't able to do the tour?
I don't think he's credited on the album, which that's what made me feel sad about it. It does have a very young Dave King in a very different style from what he does now. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the guy's voice is absolutely phenomenal. But Well, that was a great band. I mean, I remember some of those videos on MTV back in the early 80s when I was a young kid and seeing those Fastway videos and then hearing the history and then always thinking that Pete Way was the bass player. And then finding out years later that he never played on the album, he never toured with the album because of some issues with his visa, because he was in some sort of trouble. He couldn't make it to the recording of it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you mention Pete Way, and you mentioned Michael Schenker, who's got a very large personality too as well. I had the pleasure of interviewing him for the show on a previous episode, and great interview, but very interesting perspective. And of course, Phil Mogg, who was able to stay with the band up until the very end, until they decided to stop touring, which was a couple of years ago. Yeah. Hopefully, they do some shows or do reunite and do some other shows too as well. That'd be nice to see them again. But, he has the lead singer ego too as well. That is common in most rock bands. So having those three personalities, it's amazing that they were able to record as many of those albums as they did.
That's true. They actually were pretty productive from this lineup. And this is my favorite UFO lineup of those 5 albums in about a 4-year period of time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they really shifted from the first 2 albums prior to Schenker, bass rock, to the much more straight-ahead driving rock and roll sound that they had on those next 5 albums.
Right. The next song is "I'm a Loser." Real quick about Pete Way before I go into this. Pete Way, after the Fastway situation, he also formed another great band called Wasted, Waysted, which I think released a few albums. They were phenomenal. And I think they had a minor MTV hit, or what you considered a minor MTV hit back in the day. But if you have a chance, I don't know if those albums have been reissued, but if you can find those Wasted albums, you're in for a real treat.
Yeah.
All right. To "I'm a Loser," which is another song that really doesn't have that lift on the studio album. But again, this live album really does it justice with the energy.
Yeah, this to me, this evokes a total blue collar struggle type of feeling to it, and it starts off a little bit mellower, and then when it hits the chorus and goes "hard times," and the guitar is just hitting it's not a note, but it's very, actually reminds me of another song that came up in a discussion this week on Twitter, on Jethro Tull's Hymn 43. There's a very similar chunka feel of the guitar that they have on this. And that hard times chorus really pulls you in.
Yeah, I agree. Again, the studio version, like a lot of this record, doesn't give the lift that it needs, but listening to this live version, it really takes off in terms of enjoying the song and having that energy, like I said.
Yeah, this is definitely high up on my list of songs on this album.
The next one is "Let It Roll," another Schenker Mogg song that almost is at the end of the album. Another great version too as well. I'm glad they included it in the set list.
It's actually on the version I listened to. They have this as the 3rd song in. And so it's interesting. They moved it from almost the end to almost the beginning. It's from Force It as well. This has the interplay between the keyboard and the guitar that really makes me think of like Deep Purple Mark II or Rainbow. And it has a very tasteful playing by Schenker on kind of the interlude section of it. I mean, he's known for his flash, his burning guitar style, but he's got a lot more touch to his playing in this song.
I agree. That's one of the things too about Schenker that does make him a little different than most guitar players, is that he can shred, but he's also got a taste for the subtleties as well. He can kind of interlude them or interplay them between each other, which is really unique in his style.
Indeed.
The album ends with "Shoot, Shoot." A great way to end the album. Great way to end one of the most iconic live albums of the 70s. Fantastic song. great energy and great closer.
Yeah, this was actually a song that was written by the entire band. You don't see Andy Parker getting a whole lot of writing credits, but he's got one on this one. It's a good example of a key change in the song for the lead, and has a really cool pre-chorus riff in it that really makes the song for me.
Yeah, it's a great way to end. And, one of the greatest live albums of the 70s, as we've mentioned, a great for those collecting vinyl, those collecting live albums. If you don't have this is something that you have to have in your collection. We've just run down the original pressing, and now we're going to get into the reissues that Rob probably knows a lot more about than I do. But there's some differences in the set list. There's a couple add-ins in the songs, like the song Sherry that I mentioned earlier. So let's get to it.
Yeah, the version I listened to has some of the songs are similar in order, but there's a couple of switches. Like I mentioned with Let It Roll is a pretty significant one. It starts off with Hot and Ready, which is off of Obsession, as a good rock and roll pull you in kind of song. And from what I understand from reading it, they were making an attempt with the reissues to more closely approximate the set list as they were playing them. The second song is Cherry, about a rock and roll type of subject. I agree. I'm glad they stuck this on there because it's a shame to leave it off of the original release. Great version on this. It then goes Let It Roll, Love to Love, Natural Thing, Out in the Street, Only You Can Rock Me, Mother Mary, This Kid's, Doctor Doctor, I'm a Loser, Lights Out, Rock Bottom, Too Hot to Handle, and Shoot Shoot. And then if you sprang for the 8-disc LP version that was released in 2020, it had the original song listings for the first 2 discs that you described, and then each of the next 6 discs were individual shows. And I had to go to the internet for this because I haven't yet gotten myself to fork over the money. But disc 3, it says, was recorded at the International Amphitheater in Chicago on October 13th of 78. Disc 4 was at the Kenosha Ice Center in Wisconsin on the next day, October 14th of 78. They followed it up. They moved on to Youngstown, Ohio at the Tomorrow Club on October 15th. Then on the 16th, they played the Agora Theater in Cleveland. On the 17th, it was the Agora Ballroom in Columbus, Ohio. And they finished it off on the 18th with Disc 8 at Louisville Gardens in Kentucky. And so I've talked myself into buying this as we're sitting here talking. We're not going to tell my wife that, but I'm sure that I'm going to find the price to be a little bit steep.
Well, it's 4 discs, or no, it's 8 discs.
8
so,
discs.
Man, that'll probably be, it'd be like 150 bucks.
Well, the way vinyl is these days, it might be more than that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm going to have to figure out how to make it fit into my record racks.
What's really cool about bands back then is how they changed up the set list back in the day, right? I mean, because we just listed those shows that are on that deluxe edition. As you run through the set list on there, there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a few differences from each show, which is really cool. How many times have we seen a band and seen the set list and then know that they go play the same set list the next night, the next 7-8 nights, the whole tour?
Right.
So it's refreshing to see that. I don't know why bands don't break it up these days. I mean, I'm sure there's rehearsals, but I would like to see a little bit more improvisation or improvising from night to night. Add a couple different songs that, maybe they're not playing every show. I think that would make it more unique. But unfortunately, 90% of the bands don't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's cool when they throw in a cover of something that you wouldn't necessarily expect and kind of make it their own. You don't have any covers here on this, but somebody has gone in on Wikipedia with the 8-disc version, and they've created like a matrix of how the set list varied from night to night, so you can see how they changed up the order of things. And it's pretty cool to go through the re-releases of those 5 Schenker albums that have the bonus tracks on them and hear how they played the same song a little differently. I really like that you get variation in that.
And one thing you'll notice too about the shows that are on the deluxe edition is like we talked about in the beginning, where the Midwest, you have Chicago, you got Kenosha. Kenosha is basically, 15 minutes to an hour outside of Chicago. Youngstown, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. Those are roughly anywhere from 5 to 6 hours away from Chicago. Louisville, which is kind of like on the border of the Midwest and the South. A lot of people consider it the South, but it's not the deep South. But again, these are all Midwestern cities, Chicago being the biggest. And some of these are circuits or places where bands don't play anymore. No one really plays Kenosha that much anymore. I don't know too many bands that play Youngstown. Obviously, Cleveland, Columbus, Louisville are still major players whenever bands do tour, but they were called circuits back then, and a band would go on this stuff and they would play, amphitheaters that, when they were first starting out, they'd play high schools. I know my old high school, I think, had the Police play there. I had Kiss play there when they were first starting out. So it was a lot different vibe back in the day of how your tours would go if you were in a band. And this person, whoever broke it down with the Matrix, when you see all that, and going back to the early part of our conversation, with the Midwest being a huge part of UFO's success, it's no wonder they chose these areas, these towns, for the deluxe edition.
I'm jealous of somebody that was living in Chicago and could go to shows in October of '78. This would have been a great show to have been in attendance.
How many people went to the Chicago show and then also drove up to Kenosha? Because literally Kenosha is right over the border in Wisconsin.
That'd be cool. And the tickets back then were probably about $10-15.
If God, that's expensive. Probably like $6 or $8 back in the day, But that would be cool because if you were in Chicago going to see the International Amphitheater, and then you're going basically to Kenosha, that would be like 45 minutes without traffic. Back in the day, though, you didn't have the highways. So you probably didn't have, you probably had 2-lane highways or 4-lane highways, a lot different than it is now. It'd probably take you a little longer. So basically maybe like an hour 10, hour 20 to get up there.
Yeah. There are a lot of smaller bands these days that you can go and see them for a very reasonable price at local clubs and so forth. I was really happy to see that, let's see, what was I calling him? Chicago Chris the Elder, to distinguish him from your son. He went to see Sasquatch the other night. That made me really happy because you can get in and you can see a great show for a really reasonable price. And you might be one of those people that one day can point back to and said, I saw this band in that setting. And that's like a one-time opportunity. When we're talking about earlier, I said there's been a recent live album from this year that I think was released about 2 to 3 weeks ago. And the band, I know people are probably going to go, what? When I say what the band's name is, the band is CD Jesus, SEEDYJEEZUS. I think I'm spelling it right. It is an Australian band, and they just released a live album that they did after lockdown had finished in Australia. It's recorded in a small club setting. They have a couple of studio albums they've done prior to this. The guitarist and singer in the band is a very gracious guy. I've spoken to him via email a couple of times when he was trying to get me some physical product. And this live album has great sound. The band is clicking. It's a small audience, but you can hear the audience into it. And it nails the live rock and roll experience in a small club. So I very much recommend checking this live album out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we hit on a lot here on the Hook Rocks is for a lot of these emerging bands, for you to go see them is well within your budget. I mean, shows are as low as sometimes $10, and probably the most I've paid for a new band is probably $40, depending on the venue. But you could go see a great emerging rock band for a fraction, a tiny fraction of what they're charging for the stadium tour or what Springsteen's charging. So, but yeah, definitely a live atmosphere, seeing a band in a small club. I know, Chris from Chicago, USA, and Chris on Twitter went and saw Sasquatch at a club in the city called Reggie's, and I've been to Reggie's a few times, and it's probably a 300 capacity, 400 capacity setting. So that's a great place to see a show.
Yeah, and one of the great things about going to those places is that you almost always will encounter one of the band members working the merch table, and almost without exception, they're very willing to talk to you. They're always positive, upbeat. They're happy that you come out to see them play. It's been a really good experience being able to meet them and talk to them and see and connect with them on a one-on-one level.
Getting back to UFO Strangers of the Night, what do you think the legacy of this album is?
Well, I think that if we don't have this album, it's hard to see, especially seeing how much influence it had on a lot of the major guitar players, especially in the mid to late 80s. I'm not sure that you would have had the same level of devotion to the instrument that a lot of them seem to have. I think that it really helped define what the guitar hero might be. Schenker has that really distinctive flying V sound. I was reading that he liked to use a wah pedal, but he didn't rock the pedal. He would leave it as kind of a filter for his sound to get the tone that he got. And it really did impact a significant number of people that later on became the guitar heroes of the 80s and then into the early 90s.
I also think that any talk of its legacy should include the fact that without this album, is UFO regarded as one of the major influences of bands like Maiden and other bands like Metallica? Because this album meant so much to those bands. And of course, the studio albums are important. I don't want to say they're not. But I don't know any other band that when you talk about UFO, within the first two sentences, this album is brought up, this live album. And I don't know of another band that happens to. Obviously, Kiss Alive had a huge impact. But, Kiss is more known for the imagery and, the album covers. I mean, you can make a case for Destroyer and you can make a case for Love Gun and some of the other stuff. And of course, Alive is always in that conversation. But more so with UFO, Kiss had huge success and Kiss had sustaining success because after this album, UFO really doesn't have that sustainability afterwards. I mean, they had some good songs and some good albums, but without this album, I don't know how much UFO garners a conversation like this.
I agree with you. I think especially in the U.S. market.
Yeah.
I think you're right that if this album hadn't happened, the band probably would not be in the conversations that are had now.
Right.
And when you're talking about defining the live albums, the only other one that immediately comes to my mind where you associate that live album with the reason that the band is known is the Allman Brothers at the Fillmore.
Or even the one we just did a few months ago, Humble Pie, Rockin' the Fillmore.
That's true. Yeah. So where you directly associate the band with that live album. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And how many of the guitar players that were influenced by Schenker, like Kirk Hammett, how many of them heard this album and then went backwards into their discography? Without this album, does that gateway to their music happen? You know what I mean?
Probably not. I mean, this was my gateway to their music. I had not heard the studio albums prior to hearing Strangers of the Night. I bought Strangers of the Night because of all the things that I was seeing by guitar players and how influential it was. And then I thought, well, maybe I better go see where all this material came from. And so I went backwards as a result of that. So you're absolutely right.
The difference is with Kiss Alive and Strangers of the Night, there's a lot of differences, or there's some differences and some similarities. The similarity is no album released by either band. You could even probably include Ben Lizzy in this too as well. Match that energy of the live show. I mentioned that in the beginning. The difference is that if you go back and listen to the Thin Lizzy albums, and if you go back and listen to the UFO albums, the production is good, right? It's not like the Kiss albums, the first 3 Kiss albums. The production is very thin, especially the Hotter Than Hell album, the mix on the Hotter Than Hell album. I don't know if they can ever fix that. I'd love for them to fix that because some of the stuff sounds very muddled and very suffocated. Yeah. So, yeah, when you think of those 3 bands who had a huge, or all 3 of them had huge live albums in the 70s, they all did what they needed to do, right? Create that energy, create that vibe for the band. But when you go back and listen to their studio albums, if you were to do that, the recordings are just not the same. Not the same.
Yeah. And I think with this album, especially when you compare it to Kiss Alive, this is a truer live experience.
True. I mean, Gene Simmons has come out over the last decade or so and has said that they dubbed in the crowd. They re-recorded some of the parts on it. I'm sure that happened on UFO. But, whether it was they can't re-record the drums, but if they had to do some stuff with the vocals or whatever, I'm sure every live album has a little bit of cleanup to do. But in terms of what the album was, how it was recorded, to gain that experience, I don't think you can argue the fact that you are correct. Yeah. UFO has much more of a real live experience.
I think this one also wins for coolest album title.
I agree too, because I'm trying to think, everything that comes before it really does have that live or that word in there, Rockin' the Fillmore or whatever it was that it's a live album. Strangers of the Night really doesn't have any connotation to it being a live album.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly evokes feelings of a chance meeting between people, and then they're gone. And this album came out, and there's this one lightning in a bottle moment, and then Schenker's gone. And so I think that there's something, even though they may not have known that at the time, there's something really evocative about the album that speaks to the moment in time that you're capturing.
Right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm going to go see how much I can have to spend to get the 8 discs.
See, the only thing that I'm hearing from you is you may end up on Discogs, and anytime you end up on Discogs,
that's entirely possible.
You walk away from the computer with a walk of shame, with your head down, like I just spent way too much money.
Yes, yeah. I think that if somebody
is evil.
If somebody has not listened to this album, number one, you should correct that, and number two, if you start listening to a song and you start thinking that you're knowing where the song is going to go, and maybe you think, I'm not sure if I'm into this song, let the whole song develop, because each one of them really is a journey that, like, with peaks and valleys along the way. And there are enough changes in it that you have to look at it at the song as its entirety and not just how it sounds from the very beginning.
Very good point. I 100% agree. Rob, it's been a joy as always. Always enjoyed doing this with you. Can't wait till the next one.
Me too, Jay. I can't wait to see what the audience decides.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate everyone. And always, as I mentioned always, please let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. Rate us on the streaming services that you listen to. Give us, 4 or 5 stars, hopefully. Hope you enjoyed our conversation, our live album review conversation on UFO Strangers in the Night. Till next time, till next quarter, what will we talk about? Take care, everyone. We'll talk soon.